not be the same. Few people laughed, few people cried, most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
This is exactly what this man, Julius Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the nuclear weapon, said after witnessing his creation flatten the city of Hiroshima the day before. The birth of nuclear weapons marks a pivotal chapter in history. It shaped the fate of the world at that moment and for all time. So what do we really know about this deadly weapon, or about the man who created it? We have the blockbuster film Oppenheimer, released in 2023. It's a great option if you want answers. Or you have another choice. Right here. Join us in this video. Oppenheimer, the destroyer of worlds. A typical day in Hiroshima. The people of Japan's bustling industrial city were busy preparing for a new workday. It was 8:15 a.m., August 6, 1945. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until an American strategic bomber soared over the city. From 9,400 meters above, a large black object dropped and detonated. At 580 meters above ground, a second sun was born. A colossal fireball, burning hotter than the sun itself, expanded to a 2-kilometer radius. Everything within that zone was vaporized, erased without a trace. Homes, vehicles, air, water, money, animals, humans, all reduced to nothing. At that moment, the skies over Hiroshima lost all color because no one could see anything beyond the sheer devastation. And in an instant, everyone was left temporarily blinded. But that wasn't the worst of it. The bomb's blast tore through the air, unleashing scorching winds and thermal waves that incinerated everything within a 10-kilometer radius. Water boiled and evaporated. Buildings and trees ignited. The water in human bodies vanished in an instant. A massive shockwave, traveling faster than sound, flattened the city into ruins. This gave rise to the now iconic mushroom cloud. And the man who brought this monster into the world, Julius Robert Oppenheimer. The father of the atomic bomb was born on April 22, 1904, into a Jewish family. His father, Julius Oppenheimer, was a wealthy textile importer who emigrated from Germany to the USA in 1888. His mother, Artistella Friedman, came to America with nothing, no degree, no English, just determination. He also had a younger brother, Frank, who later became a physicist and played a significant role in his work. In that era, the Oppenheimers were considered an affluent middle-class family. In 1912, they moved into an 11th floor apartment at 155 Riverside Drive, an upscale neighborhood in Manhattan, New York. Beyond that, they owned an impressive art collection. It included works by Pablo Picasso, Duard Villard, and at least 3 original paintings by Vincent van Gogh. With such a privileged upbringing and exceptional intellect, it's no surprise that Oppenheimer attended prestigious schools. A gifted student, he was passionate about literature, English, and French, but most of all, he loved mineralogy. He completed both 3rd and 4th grade in a single year and skipped half of 8th grade. By his final year of high school, Oppenheimer and his brilliant mind turned their focus to science, and he was determined to pursue it. But fate never gives anyone everything. Despite his genius, Oppenheimer entered Harvard a year late at 18, majoring in chemistry, due to ulcerative colitis he developed while surveying minerals. This happened during a summer vacation with his family. Besides chemistry, Harvard's curriculum required him to study history, literature, philosophy, or mathematics. To make up for lost time, he took 6 courses per semester. He was inducted into the Phi Beta Kappa Honor Society in his first year. He was granted special permission to attend graduate physics lectures based on a self-study plan. This allowed him to skip introductory courses and jump straight into advanced studies. And this is where the legend was born. During one particular class, led by this man, physics found Oppenheimer purely by chance. In 1924, Oppenheimer received an acceptance letter from Christ's College, University of Cambridge. He wrote to Ernest Rutherford, requesting permission to work at the Cavendish Laboratory. Percy Bridgman, a renowned Harvard physicist, wrote him a recommendation letter stating, "Oppenheimer's clumsiness in the lab makes it clear that his strength lies not in experimental physics, but in theoretical physics. Tall and thin, a heavy smoker, and often skipping meals during periods of intense concentration, Oppenheimer's self-destructive tendencies worried his friends." A disturbing incident occurred when Oppenheimer vacationed in Paris, visiting his friend Francis Ferguson. Ferguson, sensing Oppenheimer's distress, tried to cheer him up by sharing news of his engagement to Francis Keeley. Oppenheimer did not take the news well. He lunged forward and tried to strangle Ferguson. Though Ferguson easily pushed him away, the incident convinced him that Oppenheimer had serious psychological issues. Throughout his life, Oppenheimer suffered bouts of depression, once even telling his brother, "I need physics more than I need friends." After years of rigorous study, in March 1927, at age 23, Oppenheimer earned his PhD. He published numerous papers making significant contributions to the emerging field of quantum mechanics. Like many before him, after completing his education, Oppenheimer embarked on a career of teaching and deeper scientific research. Perhaps his greatest teaching strength was his remarkable intuition. He always knew where the most important problems lay and carefully chose his research topics. He lived with these problems, relentlessly searching for answers. And he shared his intellectual pursuits with his research group. At his peak, Oppenheimer supervised about 8 to 10 graduate students and around 6 postdoctoral researchers. He met with them daily in his office, discussing their research progress one by one. In a single afternoon, they might debate quantum dynamics, cosmic rays, and nuclear physics all at once. Oppenheimer made crucial discoveries in astrophysics, particularly in general relativity and nuclear theory. He extended quantum electrodynamics. He also explored the mathematical formalism of relativistic quantum mechanics, despite skepticism about its feasibility. His work predicted several later discoveries, including the neutron, meson, and neutron stars. He also contributed to theoretical cosmic ray exposure studies, laying the groundwork for quantum tunneling theory. Beyond that, Oppenheimer undertook countless research projects spanning multiple scientific fields. Yet, none of this is what he is remembered for. Instead, history remembers him for this. In the mid-20th century, World War II raged on. On October 6, 1939, a letter was placed on the desk of the U.S. president. It warned that Nazi Germany had made breakthroughs in nuclear research, which could lead to what the letter described as extremely powerful new bombs. At the end, it was signed Albert Einstein. Of course, Einstein was not a spy, but he had friends who had been closely following this development. In December 1938, two German scientists accidentally discovered that uranium atoms could be split into two radioactive fragments. Later, two American scientists, Enrico Fermi and Leo Szilard, believed that this discovery could be used to create an atomic bomb with destructive power beyond anything the world had ever seen. Fermi and Szilard began efforts to build their own nuclear reactor with only the resources of Columbia University. However, a newspaper report deeply concerned Szilard. It revealed that Germany had seized uranium mines in Czechoslovakia and prohibited the Czech government from selling uranium to anyone except the Nazis. Even more alarming, Szilard discovered that Nazi Germany was actively working to develop its own atomic bomb. But at the time, Szilard felt he wasn't influential enough to convince the president. He needed a more reputable name. Szilard arranged a meeting with Einstein, presented his concerns, and persuaded him to sign the letter to the president. He then handed the letter to Alexander Sachs, an economist and scientific advisor who was also a close friend of President Roosevelt, ensuring it would not be overlooked. Eventually, President Roosevelt agreed to meet with Sachs. After the meeting, the president struggled to grasp the full implications of the issue, but he summed it up in one sentence: "Your job now is to make sure the Nazis don't blow up America." Roosevelt then called in General Edwin Watson, his senior military aide, handed him the documents, and ordered the launch of what would become known as the Manhattan Project. "This problem requires action," the president declared. In 1939, the U.S. established agencies to oversee the early phases of the Manhattan Project, beginning with the Uranium Committee. Based on the committee's research, the U.S. government began funding the work of Enrico Fermi and Leo Szilard at Columbia University. Their research focused on radioactive isotope separation, also known as uranium enrichment and nuclear chain reactions. After the Manhattan Project was officially launched, in May 1942, James Bryant Conant, chairman of the National Defense Research Committee, who had once taught Oppenheimer at Harvard, invited him to work on fast neutron calculations. This was a task Oppenheimer excelled at. His colleagues even nicknamed him Coordinator of Rapid Rupture, referring to the rapid neutron chain reactions in an atomic bomb. However, at this stage, Oppenheimer was not yet a central figure in the project. In June 1942, the U.S. Army took control of the Manhattan Project, assuming responsibility from the Office of Scientific Research and Development. And Oppenheimer's role began to shift. It changed the moment this man, General Leslie Groves, was appointed to lead what was now officially called the Manhattan Project. Groves chose Oppenheimer to lead the project's secret weapons laboratory, a surprising decision to many. Oppenheimer was neither politically aligned with the conservative military establishment, nor an experienced leader of large-scale projects. Even Groves himself had reservations. Oppenheimer had no Nobel Prize. How could he command the respect of others? But Groves was impressed by Oppenheimer's deep understanding of the practical aspects of bomb design and construction, as well as his vast knowledge across multiple fields. As a military engineer, Groves knew that such qualities were crucial in a multidisciplinary field involving not just physics, but also chemistry, metallurgy, ordnance, and engineering. Groves also saw in Oppenheimer something others missed: an overwhelming ambition that he believed would provide the drive necessary to push the project to success. In hindsight, This appointment was regarded as a stroke of genius by Groves, who was not often credited with genius. At the time, the U.S. was not the only nation pursuing an atomic bomb program. In Britain, two German-born British scientists, Rudolf Peierls and Otto Frisch, worked tirelessly to outpace their German counterparts in the race for nuclear weapons. Oppenheimer and Groves decided that for security and coordination, they needed a centralized, highly secretive laboratory in a remote location. While searching for such a site, Oppenheimer became drawn to New Mexico, not far from his ranch. After multiple site evaluations, they chose a private boys' school called the Los Alamos Ranch School. To maintain secrecy, the Los Alamos Laboratory was constructed on the school grounds, repurposing its facilities while rapidly erecting additional buildings. There, Oppenheimer assembled some of the greatest physicists of his time, whom he referred to as his bright stars. At Los Alamos, security was tighter than ever. Even the scientists whose letter had sparked the Manhattan Project, Einstein and Szilard, were barred from entering. Szilard was occasionally granted limited access to certain Manhattan Project sites, but Groves actively worked to restrict his involvement. Szilard, a German-born scientist and an outspoken pacifist, found this deeply concerning. Groves repeatedly requested that Szilard be removed from the project. When those requests were denied, the FBI was ordered to monitor Szilard at all times. Einstein was also excluded from the project, as the U.S. military deemed him unfit to handle top-secret national security matters. A military report stated, "Professor Einstein is an extreme radical with tie to communist activities." Even the media was banned from reporting on nuclear science in any form. At first, Oppenheimer struggled with organizing large teams. But he quickly mastered the art of large-scale management after deciding to live on site at the facility. He gained recognition for his ability to grasp every scientific aspect of the project and for his efforts in managing the inevitable cultural clashes between scientists and the military. As a scientific leader, he was idolized by his brilliant colleagues, almost a symbol of what they were striving to achieve. Oppenheimer led both the theoretical and experimental research in the truest sense of the words. His uncanny ability to identify the core of any subject with frightening speed was a decisive factor. He familiarized himself with the essential details of every aspect of the work. Oppenheimer did not lead from a command center. He was present at every crucial step, whether in the lab, at conferences where new experimental results were discussed, or when fresh ideas were conceived. He wasn't the one constantly generating ideas or giving directions, but his greatest influence lay elsewhere. It was his intense and continuous presence that created a sense of direct engagement among all his colleagues. This fostered a unique atmosphere of enthusiasm and intellectual challenge that spread throughout the project's duration. After 6 years of laboratory research, the Manhattan Project scientists finally created what they believed to be an effective nuclear weapon. And now it was time to test it. July 16, 1945. A nuclear bomb, code-named Gadget, was transported to the Jornada del Muerto Desert, about 35 miles southeast of the small town of Socorro, New Mexico. To prevent unforeseen mishaps, the bomb was placed inside a steel containment vessel weighing 210 tons, with surrounding walls nearly 36 centimeters thick. If the test failed, Groves and Oppenheimer believed they could safely recover the plutonium inside the containment vessel. When detonated, Gadget unleashed an explosion equivalent to 20,000 tons of TNT, forming a massive fireball and a mushroom cloud that rose over 12 kilometers into the sky. The results far exceeded expectations, ushering in the atomic age. As project director, Robert Oppenheimer put it, "We knew the world would never be the same again." Less than 30 days after the test, the bomb was put to use. On August 6, 1945, the first atomic bomb, Little Boy, was dropped on Hiroshima. Less than 3 days later, a second bomb, Fat Man, was dropped on Nagasaki. For Groves, the use of the bombs on Japan was a victory. But not everyone saw it that way. Many scientists involved in the Manhattan Project regretted their role, including Oppenheimer. The atomic bomb has made the world a worse place, Oppenheimer admitted during the Cold War. He dedicated himself to ending the nuclear arms race in the name of peace. His activism was so intense that he was accused of being a communist by the House Un-American Activities Committee. One thing is certain, the Manhattan Project changed the world forever. In 1949, Soviet scientists, using acquired data, developed a nuclear bomb modeled after the one dropped on Nagasaki. After World War II, the United States established the Atomic Energy Commission to apply Manhattan Project technologies to other fields. Finally, in 1964, President Lyndon Johnson ended the era of exclusive government control over nuclear energy by allowing private ownership of nuclear materials. Since then, the nuclear fission technology perfected by Manhattan Project scientists has formed the basis for nuclear reactors, power plants, and numerous other innovations. Notably, it has been applied in medical imaging technologies, such as MRI scanners, as well as in radiation therapy for treating various cancers. As of today, 9 countries are believed to possess nuclear weapons. Yet, among these 9, Germany is notably absent. Isn't that rather strange? Wasn't Germany initially the leader in nuclear research, the very reason the US rushed to launch the Manhattan Project? Why then does Germany not possess nuclear weapons today? Going back to World War II, German scientists were the first to build an experimental nuclear reactor. However, their efforts to develop nuclear weapons ultimately fell short of success. Even though they had pioneered research that would later catalyze nuclear fission studies worldwide. As early as 1939, intelligence reports confirmed that Germany was leading the race to develop an atomic bomb. Germany was the birthplace of nuclear fission research, first achieved by scientists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann in 1938. Although Hitler's racial purges forced many of Germany's top Jewish scientists into exile, Germany still retained a formidable team of talented physicists. After invading Czechoslovakia in 1939, Germany seized control of uranium mines in Joachimsthal. Through its conquests across Western Europe, Hitler gained access to hundreds of tons of uranium from Belgium, the world's only heavy water production facility in Norway, and advanced isotope separation technologies. These were all critical for nuclear weapons development, technology that even Germany itself had not yet established on its own soil. Despite technical challenges, Germany constructed a nuclear reactor in Berlin, installed another near Torgau, and accumulated enough plutonium for bomb production. Faced with this threat, the Allies launched an extensive campaign to cripple Hitler's nuclear program. In November 1942, a Special Forces team launched a glider mission to destroy the heavy water plant in Norway. Though the mission was not entirely successful, it dealt a blow to the Nazi nuclear effort. The British compiled a list of German nuclear targets for potential attacks. By late 1943, the British Air Force firebombed the Degussa uranium refinery. In September 1944, a ferry carrying heavy water from Norway to Germany was sunk. Yet, analysts concluded that Hitler's failure to build a nuclear bomb, despite his early lead, stemmed largely from his mismanagement and misguided investments. One of the physicists involved in Germany's nuclear program was theoretical physicist Werner Heisenberg. He was a pioneer of quantum mechanics and a Nobel Prize-winning physicist. Unlike the American scientists, who were unified under Oppenheimer and General Leslie Groves in the Manhattan Project, Germany's nuclear scientists were divided into 3 competing teams, each conducting separate experiments. These groups were codenamed after the cities housing their research facilities: Berlin, Gotha, and Leipzig. Despite beginning their work 12 years earlier, the Germans lagged significantly in developing a functioning nuclear reactor. The primary reasons were competition for scarce resources, intense rivalries between research groups, and ineffective leadership. By the winter of 1944, as Allied forces began invading Germany, Heisenberg and his colleagues made a desperate final attempt to achieve a sustained nuclear chain reaction. The Germans suspected that Berlin would lose the war, but they hoped that achieving nuclear fission would preserve the prestige of their scientific community. At the time, they were still unaware of the significant progress made by the Manhattan Project. Heisenberg's research team retreated to the south, setting up operations in a secret underground laboratory beneath a castle in Hagerlich. There, they carried out one final experiment designated as B8. A German Nobel Prize-winning scientist described this experiment in detail in his book, Nuclear Physics, published in 1953. They assembled a total of 664 uranium cubes, suspended by aircraft cables before being submerged in a heavy water tank with graphite-lined walls. Despite making significant progress, German scientists still failed to achieve criticality. To better illustrate this, let me show you something. This is a uranium cube displayed at the University of Maryland in 2013. It is a 5 cm long uranium cube weighing 2.2 kilograms. This cube was one of the materials used in Nazi Germany's nuclear experiments. Research shows that these were merely the initial steps of German scientists at that time. Germany was never truly close to developing a nuclear weapon for self-defense. Gamma spectroscopy results indicate that the cube's isotopic composition was similar to that of natural uranium, neither depleted nor enriched. The cube never reached critical mass and contained no fission products like CaCm-137. But how did the Americans get their hands on this? The answer is simple: they were the victors. In 1944, as Allied forces advanced deeper into Nazi-occupied territories, General Leslie Groves launched a mission code-named ALSOS, aimed at gathering intelligence on German scientific research. However, the Americans were primarily interested in Germany's uranium research program. One of the key figures leading the American scientists in this mission was Samuel Gaudsmit, who later founded the scientific journal Physical Review Letters. By late April 1945, the ALSOS mission team had reached Hagerlich. The German physicists there, including Heisenberg, were arrested and interrogated. Through these interrogations, the Americans learned that as Allied forces advanced into southern Germany, the Nazis had hastily dismantled their experimental reactor, buried uranium cubes in nearby fields, and poured heavy water into barrels hidden inside restrooms. As a result, a total of 659 uranium cubes were recovered, along with the heavy water, and transported to Paris before being shipped to the United States. One of the primary reasons for this decision was to prevent the Soviet Union from using these materials for their own nuclear weapons program. Contrary to initial assumptions that German scientists failed to build a functioning nuclear reactor due to a shortage of uranium. Recently declassified documents reveal that Nazi Germany actually had more uranium cubes than previously thought. Had they managed to consolidate just 50 more uranium cubes in their experimental reactor, the Germans might have reached criticality. The primary reason for Hitler's failure was his misallocation of resources, scattering them instead of unifying them. Fortunately, Nazi Germany never gathered enough uranium, as Heisenberg had requested. Despite U.S. efforts, some uranium cubes still ended up on the black market before reaching the Soviet Union. Several of these cubes were also secretly smuggled into the United States and fell into the hands of private collectors, including Robert Nenninger, who was then responsible for asset management in Manhattan, where uranium shipments from Europe were received. Today, we continue to live in the era of nuclear weapons. We do not know when it will end, but I am certain that when it does, it will mark the end of the world as well. What is your perspective on Oppenheimer and nuclear weapons, the ultimate weapon created by humanity? Let's just hope they think carefully before pressing any launch button. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you soon in our upcoming videos. Goodbye, and have a great day.